Oh, hi, my name is Mikey Bronowski and I would like to invite you to my presentation as part of the Festive Tech Calendar 2021. I will take you for a journey where you can arm your bicep with disk or DSC. Well, let's see. Let's start with DSC, which stands for Desired State Configuration. DSC is a tool that helps you to keep your infrastructure as a code. So you can write a script, define all the variables and all the resources, and then deploy it, and it will build whatever you need. So in my case, I'm going to use SQL Server resources to build SQL Server. But first, a little demo how the DSC works in general. If you want to learn more about DSC, go to the Microsoft website, Microsoft Docs, PowerShell Scripting DSC, and then you will find the overview. I'm going to use the SQL resources later in the demo from the DSC community on GitHub, and the main part it can be downloaded or installed from PowerShell Gallery. It requires minimum PowerShell version 6.1, and I have this on my computer right now. I have 7.2, I believe. So let's start with the short DSC demonstration. I'm going to navigate to the folder where I keep all my demos. Perfect. And I will show you how the config file looks like, because that's where is the heart of the DSC. So let's open the config file. And what we can see here is a function, configuration function, which I called DSC Demo. I can have a parameter as for any PowerShell function. So in my case, that's a array of strings for computer names. I can provide the list of computer names, and here I'm importing the resource for the desired state configuration just ahead of time, so I don't get a warning later on. And here's the definition of the node. So I'm using my computer, but it's a node for a computer name, which when we provide the parameter for the function, it will work on this computer. And in this short demo, I'm going to create a directory, which is this bit. I'm going to create a folder called DSC Demo dir. So I'm using the resource for file, the name of the resource, it will be type, which is directory, destination path, and the ensure value will be present, like Christmas presents. I hope you had good, nice Christmas presents. The other resource would be the file, and I want to have it. I want this resource depend on the previous resource, so I provide the name of the type of the resource and the name of that resource, which is file DSC Demo dir, and that means that before I create the file, I have the folder. So I don't create file in the folder that doesn't exist. That only Santa can do. That resource is file type, and the destination path would be the final name of the file, and also the presents, because it's Christmas time or was Christmas time. And I'm also putting some contents into the file, because empty file is not fun, like empty presents, empty boxes. So let's put something in the file, and with that function we should be ready to go and deploy create the folder and create the file. Let's close this one. Now the next part is .source the config file with the function. So let's do this. And now we need to make sure we clean up all the folders that might interfere with the demo. You don't have to do this if you start from the scratch, but since I might have something, I'm just going to make sure I don't have any extra folders. So let's clean this up. I don't have any extra folders. That's all I want it to be. It's all there. And let's make sure the folder and the content of the folder that we are going to create is also empty. Let's remove that bit, and now we have it all clean. Perfect. So the next bit is to execute the function, the configuration function that we just created with the parameter which is computer name, and I can provide a list of computer names. In my case, an environment variable that will be my host name, my laptop. I can provide a local host as well, and some other computer in the North Pole or somewhere, or maybe it's in Scotland, or somewhere where it's cold right now. It might be anywhere in the UK. And let's do this, run this function. You might notice some errors because later on, because I don't really have access to this computer, and this will be basically the same machine. So what we have here, we've created 3 MOF files, MOF files, and what those MOF files are, let's see. Let's go here and let's open the localhost file. And the MOF file, it's the compiled version of the config file. It has all the bits, all the nasty bits you don't want to write. It has a lot to do with the resources, so we don't have to modify this file. We will just use it to deploy the folder. And so now I'm going to start the configuration, and my configuration is in the folder DSC Demo. As you can see, the folder was empty before. Now I have 3 MO files, and I have 2 parameters here. Wait will make sure it waits until the command finishes, and verbose just to see some extra bits. You can skip it if you don't need to read all the output. So let's run this now. You can see some errors. That's fine. In my case, it's fine because I know I don't have access to the Festive Tech calendar computer. And now we've seen I removed the folder. Now we can open that folder that's been created. See DSC Demo there. It's opened somewhere. It's here, and we can see the file. Now I can open the file, and the content is in the file. Awesome. So that's how the DSC works in very, very short presentation. When you've got the idea, you write the code, you can run the code, and then it creates objects in your environment. In my case, it was just simply folder and file, but we will do something more advanced. We will install the SQL Server with the build. So to do so, we will need to learn a bit about ARM and Bicep. But before that, let's go to the AZ module just to see what else we can do with the DSC. We can publish DSC config, and what that means, let's make sure I'm in the proper location. We can upload the DSC to a Azure blob storage or as a local zip file. So let's run this. Here's my function file, the one I've been using here, and I want to create the zip file. I have the, oh, I don't have this file yet, no, so we're going to create it. And it's here. And now I can also deploy the config to the Azure storage, blob storage. I'm not going to do this right now, but it's possible to just upload this directly to the blob storage, so you know what's there. And if you want to go to the zip file, let's see how the file looks like. So that's a zip file, and when we open that, we can see two other files. One is the PS1, the config file, the config function file, and there's the metadata. When you can open that, and it just doesn't have any modules. So that's it. That's what's in the zip file. Not much to worry about. Cool. So that's basics of DSC. Let's move on to the next part. Okay, next bit are ARM templates, which stands for Azure Resource Manager. More about the templates you can read on the Microsoft Docs as always. I'm not going to show you all the bits, how to create them, how to design them and use all these like shiny bits in ARM. I'm just going to tell you ARMs are presented in JSON file. So basically they have lots of brackets. Yeah, if that's what you get from this presentation, that ARM templates are mostly brackets, then it's a success. Let's go to the location on my laptop. Perfect. And now we can see I have this resource group in Azure portal, and I have some VM there. The backup, the reason for the backup is when I have the live presentation, I have this built and ready waiting, just in case Azure resources are taking too long to create, so I can show something to the attendees. So let's go to Azure portal. Here is the resource group, and you can see all the resources in the resource group, like VM, like storage or networks. That's fully functional virtual machine with SQL Server on it, and I just want to download the script, the template. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code, define some parameters. So my name for resource group, my name for VM, and using the function of the AZ module, Azure module, I'm going to grab details about this resource group. So I'm going to get the resource group and then export it to the file. Let's see. And I want to, yes, I want to save it, override, because I did this before, and I want to override this file, this JSON file. It's saved here. So when I open the file now, we can see how my resource group looks like. It's a huge JSON file. Well, not that huge, but well, it's a lot of brackets, as I mentioned before. And you have all the bits and bobs here from what I've created in the before. So you can see very important stuff like my passwords or firewall rules that I allow everyone to connect to my virtual machine, because it's December and it's the time where we invite everyone to our virtual machines. So in next few days you have to disable those firewall rules. Don't invite everyone to your virtual machines, especially to production ones. Perfect. So you can see I've exported the resource group and all its resources as a JSON file, and I can backup it. And that's ARM template. Well, more or less. We can also export a single resource. Let's say I want to just export the VM. So I don't want to export all the storage and networks. I want to export the VM. So I'm going to grab the resource ID like this from get AZ resource. And now I'm going to export the group, but providing the resource ID, which means it will just export the resource. Well, yes, of course we want to override, because why not? We don't keep backups. Backups are for week. Well, not for the week, like time. And we can also have Azure resource group deployments, and we can also have the templates from the deployments. So let's see my deployments. It doesn't look like I have any. No, I have one. Perfect, because I've just created the resource group. But if you have more deployments, and you can have failed deployments as well, it will be listed there, and you can export the deployments, any deployment, failed or succeeded, doesn't matter. So we can have also AZ deployments that will be on the, so the first one is Azure resource group deployment within the resource group. That's why I provided the resource group name. But here it's the Azure account deployment. So whatever I deployed to on the subscription level. Okay, so one last bit, we can have this, well, I save it as a template. We have the Azure resource group deployment. I want to have the latest one, and I want to save the, well, this function couldn't be any longer, save -az resource group deployment template. So that is the deployment failed or succeeded, and I can save it as well as a JSON file. And it's done, and it's here. Perfect. That's my JSON file. It's a bit shorter, but it's there. And as you can see, if you are like Sherlock Holmes, you've probably seen this already. There is a URL to my DSC config, and it's a zip. So I'm storing this on my blob storage. There's a config file, which is here, and I have a function SQL install, and that's part of the ARM template. And it's still, we didn't touch any Bicep, but it's part of the ARM template. So you can use DSC resources with ARM templates, which is, well, which is good. And we are using the DSC extensions. Yeah, so that's how you do the ARM templates. And what can I say? Let's move to the Bicep, because, well, I don't really like brackets. So let's move to the Bicep, shall we? Okay, so we are in the Bicep part of the presentation. More about Bicep you can find out about the Bicep on Microsoft Docs. As always, it's hidden under ARM, so Azure Resource Manager, and Bicep. And Bicep is just a format file, different format file, which is a bit cleaner than the JSON with all these brackets. I realize that I say brackets a lot, but well, I hate brackets. They always cause problems, especially the missing ones or the extra ones. But they have the missing one. Well, I hate brackets. So let's clean the space, move to the Bicep folder, and to do so, to do this part of demo, I'm going to, well, I have this installed, but for you need to install a AZ module, which is Azure module, to manage the Azure resources from PowerShell, and DBA tools. If you don't know DBA tools, that's a module created by community, and it's a SQL Server related module, because I'm SQL Server DBA, so I talk about SQL all the time. And you can see DBA tools are a set of commands that will help you to manage SQL Server from PowerShell. So you don't have to use Management Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, the GUI one. You can use PowerShell, which is awesome. Okay, anyway, I have this installed on my laptop. And for the next part, I'm also going to use Chocolatey. Chocolatey is a package manager for Windows where you can install almost any app from command line, and it just requires 4 words, 4 bits, Choco install app name and confirmation. You can even skip the confirmation if you set the configuration properly. I didn't, so I used the confirmation, but you can. Anyway, that's the bit for the host actually. So I'm going to install the Azure CLI, because I'm going to use CLI instead of PowerShell. I thought about using something different, so I've installed the Bicep from Azure CLI, and I installed the Azure CLI with Chocolatey. Too much chocolate, but it's December. We are allowed to eat chocolate. It's cold. And what else? The Bicep has one interesting option, that we can decompile the ARM template, the JSON file, into the Bicep format. So let's see. I have this file, ARM to Bicep, which looks like, well, JSON. And I lost my screen. And then I can decompile that file into the Bicep. Let's see how it works. Yes, we get a warning. It's not ideal. It might be that the decompilation is not one-to-one. There might be some missing bits, so be aware of that. You've got this warning here. So the ARM2Bicep file, output file, has been created as arm2bicep.bicep, and I could probably create a better name for this file. Anyway, the original file was arm2bicep.json, and that was the one with the brackets, lots of them. And there is the bicep.bicep file, which has brackets as well, but not so many. And that's a good amount of brackets. And you can see the structure of this is the parameters, where we have the nickname or the username for the virtual machine. My password, don't use this password. It doesn't work. I always forget the password and it doesn't want. It's not the one. And all these variables, and then we can also have what's available, like in ARM templates we can have this, and then we have all the resources. What we are interested in, like the firewall, allow everything and everyone, and we are most interested in the resource that uses the DSC. So it's somewhere there called DSC extension. We've seen that for ARM, and it looks very similar. Again, it calls the zip file, it downloads the zip file I have on my blob storage, runs the config function, the config file with the function SQL install, and builds the SQL Server. So that's the Bicep, and I'm just going to quickly show you how my config file looks like. My config zip file for the demo for the demo to build SQL looks like that. So I have the function SQL install. I import lots of different resources in the function, so I don't have to worry about importing them later on. It has extra bit that all the extra resources will be downloaded when I export the config zip file. So I have PS Desired State Configuration, XP Desired State Configuration, SQL Server because I want to install SQL, and storage because I do stuff with storage. And to install SQL Server, I need to first, well, I'm working on the local host. It's just for one computer. You've seen that I use parameter. For this one, I don't use. I just use the local host because I'm installing the SQL Server on the local host I'm just building. So I need to first install the .NET Framework 4.5, and then I'm going to, this bit is interesting, I'm going to download the image of the SQL Server. I have this in my blob storage account. It's ISO for SQL 2019, and I will copy that file to the local machine, to the one I'm building with Bicep. Do we follow? I don't follow. Yes. So I'm building the machine with Bicep, with all these resources, resource groups. And then when it's built, I'm downloading the file and saving it to this location because I'm creating this folder with DSC. Makes sense. Then, once I have the ISO file, what would I do? Normally, I would mount it as an S drive. So I'm going to, because S stands for SQL, or Snow, or Snake, or SQL. And I mount it. And I had this remote, depends on before, but I don't really need it anymore. But you can use it. It's there. And what I have there, I wait for the volume just to make sure the volume has been mounted. That's an extra resource to make sure it's all there. And then I start the SQL setup. SQL setup resource, I call it as install default instance because I want to install default instance of SQL Server. The instance name is MS SQL Server as for default SQL Server instance. I want to install just the engine, no extra components. The source path is the S drive, which is the drive that I just mounted the ISO file that I downloaded from blob storage within the same DSC process, the same DSC file. I'm going to add my administrators because they are important, and basically they are me and just me. And I'm also making sure that this SQL installation waits on the Windows feature to be installed and the image is mounted. Because if I don't do this and it's not ready, the SQL installation will fail. And that's it. That's the whole DSC file for my SQL install. Wow, that's brilliant. Really, I'm so excited now. And perfect. So let's see how to create this beautiful machine with all the scripts. I'm going to create the group, the Festive Tech Calendar in the UK South, because that's where I reside. So let's see the portal. You might see some other resource groups there as well. There is no Festive Tech Calendar resource group yet. There is the one with the backup, but we don't need that yet. So let's see. Let's install let's create the resource group. I'm using the Azure CLI to create the resource group. It's done. When I refresh the portal, it takes a while, but it's there. I promise it will be there for sure. It's there, but it's just empty, no resources. So I'm going to run this command az deployment group create, which will create the resources, deploy the resources within the resource group that I just created, Festive Tech Calendar, using the template file, which is a main Bicep. And that's not exactly the same file as I showed you, the conversion, because I wanted to make sure there's no errors. So that's a different file. It's slightly different, but the idea is the same. You might even not notice the difference, but I'm still using the DSC resource here, DSC extension and config file with the config function, the SQL install. So it should work. Oh. So let's go here and kick off the deployment. And you can see in the VS Code, in a while, it will show you that it's doing something. It's running. It also shouts at me. It doesn't really like that I have hard-coded values for secure parameter like password. So if you don't want to be shouted at, don't use plain text passwords in your files. And I also use URLs. Don't use that either. I don't care, but you might. So let's see what it is actually doing. Let's switch to the portal. Boom. We have some resources. Perfect. It was just empty here, but I just created the deployment. So let's see what we are doing here. We are most interested in the VM. We want to RDP to the VM. The VM is still not ready, so we need to wait a while. It's still not created. It's still in progress. Oh, perfect. And now, what's my password? What's my account? Who knows that? Huh. Now I'm clever because I have this in the open text. Clear text is useful if you have a memory of a goldfish. Well, that's a really bad practice. Don't use this. Unless you are a goldfish. But then you don't have hands and fingers to type your password in. Enough this fishy stuff. Let's connect to the machine. It became dark. Yay! So my machine is up and running now. Almost. I'm logging in. And hopefully we can see some magic here. It's loading. Just wait a while. Not too long. And now what I'm going to open is Task Manager. We can see it's working hard. I want to open the folder. I was too late. The file is already mounted. The ISO is already mounted, and the file is downloaded. It was much quicker than it used to be. Anyway, we can see that the SQL, that's scenario engine process is the SQL Server installation. So we can see it's being installed now. And if we are lucky, we can see SQL Server here being installed right now. And we can see all the bits here. And it's being just created. Perfect. We can see the config file that was used. So you can see that I pushed the deployment with the Bicep to build the VM, the environment, the resource groups. Well, the resource group has been created before the deployment, but other resources have been created just after that. And then the DSC file within the Bicep did all the other parts, like downloaded the file. It actually downloaded the file and it mounted the file, the ISO file, to the drive. And now it's installing the SQL Server. And it's just plain installation. I didn't add any extra bits because I didn't want to didn't want to make it overwhelming with too much SQL. There's no too much SQL, but I can imagine that that's my world for database engineer. So now we are installing SQL. It takes a while, but you can believe me, it's getting there. It will be there, and then we can see when it's done, we should see the SQL Server installation, a SQL Server service here. So you can wait with me a while. Oh, wow, it's busy. Well, I'm cheap, so I've used some not very expensive resources on Azure, but it's doing its work. It's working. It's installing stuff. Can you see the lights? Huh. Well, that's it. That's the lights. And well, that's it. I'm installing the SQL. Well, not me. I'm taking too much credit for that. I just hit the button. I could actually be a goldfish. Goldfish can hit the button. Well, it cannot type the password, but it can hit the button. So a goldfish could install the SQL Server in Azure. Well, now I'm worried about my job. And we need to wait. I think it's getting there. Yay, the SQL Server installation is done. So we can see the SQL Server is up and running. We have the SQL Server agent, SQL Server engine installed. And that's how you install resources with DSC, well, with Bicep using DSC resources. And you don't have to click a single window or a next button. It will just do it by yourself, by itself, not yourself. You create the template by yourself. So it's done. And that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed the session about how to arm your Bicep with the DSC. And I'm hoping you will enjoy the rest of the sessions of the festive calendar 2021. And I'm really glad I could be with you this year as well. So big thanks to all organizers, Richard and Gregor, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys. And I wish you a very, very good New Year 2022. See you there. See you next time. Bye.